Again, if you attend the webinar on templates, you're in the right place. Our agenda for today is 6 different bullet points that we're going to be talking about. The one that's probably most common to everybody here in this group, how to manage templates related to your SOLIDWORKS part assembly and drawing files, and also managing Toolbox and design library data. We find this to be a big sticking point with companies that either have a PDM system or don't, but tend to have multiple users, and where that information is kept. So we're going to touch on areas both with and without a PDM system for you there. Something that might be a little bit of a different concept is how do you manage your Windows templates? So when we talk about that, we're referring to things such as Microsoft Word, Excel, documents that you use for business purposes on a consistent, regular basis. Maybe some of them are forms that you want to make sure are followed and are kind of your best practices, things in that category. And maybe something totally out of left field to a lot of people is managing folder templates. So we'll talk a bit about that as well, both in a Windows and a PDM format. And then the ever valuable property data or metadata, how you're managing that today with SOLIDWORKS or Windows, and then how data cards tie into that environment within the PDM confines. And last of all, something that's more unique to the PDM environment, the topic of bill of material templates. Although we know a lot of companies use Excel for that, or they might have another MRP or ERP system, we're going to show you some of the advantages of using the PDM system, Enterprise PDM, specifically for handling that information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darren. We're going to have a couple of other polls at the very end. We'll save those and look forward to hearing your questions as we move along here.
All right, everybody. Okay, so let's get started on our first topic, which was the SOLIDWORKS part assembly and drawing files. And you'll see me fighting my little GoToWebinar input over here on the right-hand side, even though it's invisible to all of you. So what I first want to do is just talk a little bit about what templates mean to everybody. And of course, everybody's going to have slightly different definitions of some of these terms. But really what templates really mean to me is consistency. It's a way to foster a very consistent or a very common input where people who mean something, they mean the same thing, might input it differently. And I use the word material quite a bit for this because some will use a property called material, other will do materials with an S, and then others will do MAT''L. And different search strings will either filter or include those. And you just got to know the voodoo to make that happen. So instead of letting people put in whatever they want in a lot of cases, we want to control what they're going to do. Now, templates are going to go ahead and give us the consistency we have across the board of the 6 topics Dennis just mentioned. Now, that said, we're first talking about data management first and foremost. And with data management, some foundation functionalities are going to be check-in, check-out, revision control. And then one that's not always brought up as a very important thing is going to be permissions. Now, permissions is what allows you to not only put templates out there for people to use, but also control who can make changes. Now, we are going to ask a question of, who has ever lost a file? That's kind of a rhetorical question because I think everybody's lost a file. Other question might be, who has ever overwritten an important file accidentally? And in Windows, you really have no control over those types of things. Whenever you're just looking at a basic Windows Explorer folder, these folders aren't always the easiest types of things to do controls on. If you're looking at any types of files within these, if you want to right-click on a folder or a file, when you get into security, there's a lot of voodoo that can happen in here. And that voodoo is usually file-specific or folder-specific, and you really have to drill down deep to prevent somebody from doing something to these files or folders. Well, with data management employed, we have a lot more control over those types of things. And Dennis, I can hear you feeding through there if you can mute your mic. In SOLIDWORKS, we have the opportunity to have file open or file new templates. So you simply say file new, and right here you're going to see your tutorials and other files that you might have somewhere around your network. These happen to be on my C drive or on my D drive, depending on where they are. But I also have this folder here called SOLIDWORKS Templates in EPDM. Now, there's not a lot of voodoo to this. It really is just the same template files that you're used to already. The difference being is that these are within the actual vault. So if I go ahead and take a look at my Enterprise Data Management Vault, we're just looking at my C drive right now. So for the uninitiated, the EPDM, your portal into the vault or your vault view simply looks like another folder within wherever you set your vault view up. And by double-clicking that vault, it kind of takes over Windows in a unique form where we're still doing common Windows functions, copy, paste, double-click, slow double-click to rename, things like that. But we have a lot more data at hand for us. And if I take a look a little bit deeper, I have a folder under Engineering simply called Templates. And then here is where my SOLIDWORKS templates are. My assembly document template, drawing document template, and part document template, among others. So when I say File New, I have a choice to select these documents. Now because these are within the EPDM environment, I can also restrict who actually has the ability to edit these types of files. And we do that very simply by putting them in a workflow state that only a few people or select people actually have access to. In this case, it would set it as more or less a read-only format if most of your people don't have access to edit a file, in this case, the checking state. Now, if I was setting this up for a real customer, we would have a dead-end workflow for our assembly templates in which they would go in there, and again, permissions would be granted or denied based on who has access to that workflow state. So no voodoo to show here. It's just file open, file new. Now, with the next topic, the same can be said for toolbox items and design library items. If I go back up one level here, I have a file called Design Library Secure in EPDM. Now, when SOLIDWORKS ships, what we have here is a bunch of design library files. And in SOLIDWORKS, you actually have, we'll open up a new part file here from our SOLIDWORKS templates in EPDM. When I go over to the right-hand side of my SOLIDWORKS interface, there's your design library. And this is a typical thing that's going to show under the SOLIDWORKS program data if you're in Windows 7, which about 95% of the world is at this point. Well, down here just a little bit further, I have just a basic file location. And this file location happens to be in my C:\Enterprise PDM vault. Once again, the same functionality and accessibility that we would see with any other folder. In fact, I have another folder here with some similar features in it. But we have restricted what the users can do as far as editability. So the templates are out there, but they're not going to accidentally get overwritten just because somebody did a normal function of making a change and hitting the save button, and maybe they just happen to be linked back to the original. So there's some great functionality with those types of tools with that respect. Now, Toolbox is one of those things where a lot of people are using it, and you would get mixed reviews on how people like it or don't like it, just based on network functionality and network bandwidth. But the fact of the matter is with EPDM, not even with Workgroup, that's not even a function that they have, but with EPDM, we can actually manage our Toolbox library directly from within the EPDM vault. Now, what makes that important is because whenever we're editing or checking out documents, again, a foundation feature of data management is that it brings it to your local cache. Well, by managing our Toolbox data directly within Enterprise Data Management, what we now have is Toolbox or common files that are actually cached locally as well. In a typical environment, people may be using another data management tool that doesn't understand Toolbox for our workgroup data management, which is a lighter version of these same concepts. But in reality, if you have a large assembly that's primarily made up of fasteners, because fastener count usually exceeds the part counts in a lot of cases, all those fasteners are still on the network, which means you're working across and you're having bandwidth issues. By using EPDM and by simply putting your vault inside, or your Toolbox data inside the vault, those Toolbox files are also being copied and cached locally, which means performance is at the absolute best it can possibly be, unless you're working on an island and you only work on your own computer, which in a multi-user environment is rarely the case. So again, not a lot of voodoo to show here, but just the fact that these files are cached locally to a computer means you're not working across the vault. And that is a particular performance issue, and more or less, in my opinion, more of a stability issue, because a lot of things can happen between a server and a user's computer, and data packets get dropped and collisions take place. So we want to avoid that at all costs, and putting Toolbox in the vault is a very easy way to do that.
Darren, maybe you could also, I don't know if you planned on talking about some of the things we've seen come up with folks that aren't using PDM and how they manage Toolbox, some of the pros and cons of how to manage that data in a network environment with multiple users?
Well, a network environment, just by the nature of the network environment, you really have a lot that you have to do to restrict who can edit those files and who can't. The biggest thing about a Toolbox vault is that it's usually a read-only type of vault, and based on functionality, somebody pulls a socket head cap screw out, they make a change to a configuration. Behind the scenes, it's kind of changing some read-write accesses and adding things up and putting them in place. And that can be one of those things where we've seen either conflicts where it thinks a user still has that data out because Windows doesn't release the read-only capability, or we just simply have people using different toolboxes and they're not aware of that. So now we have a mismatch of the C:, toolbox on one computer full of socket head cap screws versus somebody else's. And by putting it in a common environment, which is the recommended place, we eliminate those types of mismatches. But without data management, we also inject a network performance issue directly related to that. Another thing on top of that, and we'll talk about this further, is Toolbox is just a generic database. It's got some indication of things like SHCS, AI for an ANSI inch socket head cap, but those usually aren't the properties or the manufacturing numbers or purchase numbers that people typically use. So when we talk about managing parts with data card properties, just a couple topics from now, that's really another higher order thing that you can do to the Toolbox to actually put in your supplier numbers and manage those types of properties in a much easier format. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, when I think of that issue, the one that you mentioned about having multiple copies of the Toolbox spread around on different users' computers is probably the big one that we run into quite a bit.
Yeah, it's been there for years. So, and a lot of that either happens from just installing it and not seeing that it's being installed locally to everybody's computer, or just the way we used to install it before these functions really started to peak. So better methodology to use the common database above all. Okay, so we'll get out of SOLIDWORKS here for just a second because I want to just go backwards and talk a little bit about Windows templates. Now, Windows templates, we're really just using this term to describe how you would start something on a day-to-day usage. Dennis provided me with a couple of templates that the sales staff had used over the years. We have account change request forms and a statement of work that we would use for an enterprise implementation. Now, when you open up just this basic Word document, we call this a template because it's a manual way of doing this. However, it's set to ask us who the primary contact is. So I would come in here and take that field and say it's, Dennis. Have to manage that. The company might be DASI. And this is a template in the respect that it's asking us or showing us what fields have to be filled out, but it's a completely manual process for all of this type of setup. So consistency is there. However, the workload on this is one of those things that we just want to avoid. A lot of error-prone things here and multiple pieces of data that could be similar yet different based on a user's input to these. Same type of thing with an account change request form, similar type of stuff with that. We just have these manual cells that we have to fill out, who it is, where it is, and exactly what type of data we need. When we employ something like this into a data management environment, we have a lot more control over the types of things that take place. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my vault here one more time. And under some of the files that we'd like to show here, I got a lot of approved documents within the system. Now, what you're going to see here is a setup just based on how somebody works day to day. We try to mimic the exact functionality or the exact workflows that each customer does because everybody is unique. In this case, we have approved files that might need to be changed. So a right click on that allows me, who is an administrative privilege or a management privileged person in this vault, has the capability to change the state on this file. And I can either go ahead and say this file needs to be changed, or I can just go ahead and fire off an engineering change order. Now, if I was using manual Windows types of templates, I would be printing out this piece of paper, and I would either fill it out manually, or I would open it up in Word and I would fill it out typing because my handwriting's pretty horrible. However, when we're using enterprise data management, when I fire off an engineering change order, it's going to ask me what files I want to be included, whatever I want to put as a comment, but most importantly, when I say OK to that, it's also going to go ahead and automatically fire off Microsoft Word. Now, using a template in the purest respect here, it's actually asking me to enable the content, which means there's ActiveX functionality here. So keep an eye on the cells right in this particular area. When I click Enable, you'll actually see it populate with some automatic properties from the file itself. The project number it happens to be in, the project name, which if we go back to the actual folder above that, you can actually see that we are in Project 2011, and the description is Professional Miter Saw, so it extracted that information automatically. And even more importantly, it actually gave me a hyperlink directly to that file that we happen to be talking about with this engineering change order. So there's a lot of impressive capabilities when it comes to the way these templates function. Now, again, not a lot of voodoo behind this. We do have to tell it what to put in these particular cells. So if I just go ahead and we'll save this out, that's fine. It's going to go ahead and throw it in my engineering change orders folder, and then it also goes ahead and takes the file that we have and puts it into a new state called ECO under review, which now has another person along the line now being notified that they have to do their job and take a look at this and approve or disapprove. If we look directly at what that template looks like within my EPDM Vault, it's this file right here called ECO.doc. So we call on this file and we automatically populate it. Now when I open this just as a regular old Word document, it looks very generic. However, if I right-click in those cells of importance and say toggle field codes, you can actually see that we have just some very simple properties sitting there, and it automatically grabs those properties from the data within the files in the vault. So again, not a lot of voodoo. It's just a matter of setting up that cell and saying, this is the information I'm looking for. Fills it out automatically with the project name, and up here automatically fills it out with the project number, although my spacing's not going to let us see that fully at this point. So there we go. So again, not a ton of work to get this to happen, but it so much controls the consistency of how this process takes place that we never see a difference from one document to another, regardless of the person actually doing this. So quite an important thing as a result of that. Don't need to show that other example, I don't think.
This plays into,
yeah.
Well, I'd just say that managing your Windows forms in this manner also really plays into more and more regulations that we're all required to follow, whether it's ITAR, the FDA, maybe your own QS or ISO certifications. They all meld very nicely into streamlining and adhering to those practices.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. So, of course, with the theme of templates and consistency, starting a new project is always one of those things where, especially if you're a new person within a company, you're always looking around to other people saying, okay, how do you guys usually do this? Well, you know, that's great to disseminate information in that respect, but it lengthens the onboarding process for an individual, you know, exponentially, really. If they have to figure out who the person that knows first and then see if they can glean the information from that person, unless they don't want to be forthcoming with what they know as a job security issue. We've seen all kinds of things out there. But as far as the business is concerned, we want to have things moving forward as easy as possible and bring people into the organization and have them functional as quick as possible. Now to do that, the next thing I want to show you is folder templates. The folder structure that you see in my current EPDM Vault right now is just something you should take with a grain of salt. It's more or less shown to describe to people that they can do any type of documents within the system. We're certainly not limited to SOLIDWORKS. In fact, the fact that it's built within Enterprise Data Management here means that we can go ahead and use this within any system, any piece of software that you have on your computer immediately. So with a little digression here, if I go ahead and start up a brand new Word document, if I want to put this Word document in the Vault, all I do is a basic file, save as, and then I just simply navigate to my C drive, into my Vault view. And now I am integrated with Microsoft Word directly into my Enterprise Data Management Vault. This is the case with every piece of software on your computer. No plugins necessary for any piece of software except the CAD tools, which gives us a nice little interface on the inside, understanding file references. So this is a super powerful function that's a great positive byproduct of just simply the interface that we've devised with Enterprise Data Management. Now that being the case, people are used to using Windows the way they do today. And a lot of times what we see is these elaborate structures that start with SOLIDWORKS files, and then underneath that's going to be a company name and then some elaborate date code. And then because the files are revised in a Windows environment, they're copying files and putting new date codes on them in an attempt to try and keep revision history of what they're doing. And it really gets convoluted very, very quickly. And you end up copying dozens, if not hundreds, of files that never change, just so you make sure that you don't miss one when it comes to associativity and having the intelligent CAD references update. So what we want to do is garner consistency in all aspects, including the folder structure that we have here. Now with my particular vault, you see that I have several projects here, and they're all serialized in number. That's also one of the nice benefits here, is that we can control the numbering scheme very easily. When I right-click anywhere within this vault and go to New, not only do I have the typical text file, folder, other types of things that you might do day to day, but you'll also see that I have some other interesting things here. Maybe I want to go ahead and create a new prototype part. Well, within this particular vault, if I right-click and say New Prototype Part, I am prompted for the next serial numbered SOLIDWORKS part available, which I can then go ahead and fill out a description if I'd like to. Maybe say that I'm going to build this particular file. And then some of this other stuff, maybe we'll go ahead and just fill that out based on what we know later. But as I say OK to that, oh, can't find my part template on that one, so I'm in the wrong spot to even do that kind of thing. Let's see if I can go ahead and just do it from in here instead. And I may have moved things around too. Yeah, move things around. So that's okay. My part template, template, SOLIDWORKS templates. Okay, let's just go back and make sure that those are in there. So essentially, oh, I think I've actually deleted those. Lovely. That's okay. This isn't the thing I was actually going to show for this particular example, but we'll come back to that in a second. What I wanted to show was folder templates. And what that really comes down to is if I right-click here and say I want to create a consistency from templates and then a flyout for Dennis or a new project structure, whatever that might be, go ahead and type in the project name. We're going to call that EPDM Webinar. It grabbed 2024, which happens to be the next number on my list down here. Yeah, I can't go down to that just yet. Pull-down menus. These are templates any way you slice them. I can't type in here, but I can say that I want drills and screwdrivers. And then my type is 5 different types of drills or screwdrivers. Now if I change that list to a saw, now my type list changes along with it. So now I know what kind of saw I might want. Location lists, all of these can be controlled through an ERP system or read in from the ERP system through simple XML. And then my customer list, which is a list right now, but this list changes based on what I type. And then we're just going to go ahead and copy that project name. So as I do this and say OK, keep an eye on 2024. What happens is it generates a brand new project, gives it the description that I chose, and then underneath that actually has all of the subfolders that all of my other projects have. And it's ready to go with the exact same structure that we had previously. So let me show you, especially the existing EPDM users out there, exactly how something like this can take place. I'm going to open up my Vault Admin tool. Now in the Vault Admin tool, what we have here is an area called Templates. And underneath that, you can see the 3 that I actually had on my right mouse menu there. There's consistency from templates for Dennis, there's the create prototype part, and then the project structure. So to do something like this, I'm going to go quick and dirty here just to stay within the time that we've got. But I just want to go ahead and make a new template. Now the menu string is how you show this menu for somebody's right mouse click. If I just type something like project structure, it'll be the first thing on the list. If I go ahead and mimic what's already there, and then give it a little backslash. Ooh. There we go. That's actually going to create the flyout menu or the sub menu, and you'll see that added to it. Execute as, well, permissions might prevent some people. We want to make sure that the permissions of the logged in user either executes or does not execute this, so we'll leave that as is. For a template card, well, this is an interesting thing because basically what we do with this is we create that little interface that I just made for you. So let me go ahead and actually create a card by opening up my card editor. We're going to do a brand new card. This is basic form stuff here. So this particular card isn't going to be a file or folder card. It's actually going to be a template card on this one. And we're just going to call this one EPDM Webinar with a little fat finger on the caps lock there. Okay, great. So now we've saved this thing off. Now the way these things all work is all based on properties. We call them variables within the system, but it's things like material and project name and who created it and save date. So when I put in a cell, what I'm actually doing is linking this to a particular variable. Now the variables that I want to use on this one are going to be very simple. We're just going to go ahead and use our project name, and then with a little copy and paste action here, we'll take this one here and call it project number. So we've got these cells ready to accept the information that we've got here. We'll just do a little alignment. And then we can give somebody a nice little interface on this one. We'll just call this one again project name, makes it look nice. And just for the sake of speeding it up, we'll do our project number. Great. And then very easily we can go ahead and just align these types of things. So good. And furthermore, if you really wanted to dress this kind of thing up, we can just go ahead and throw a nice little SOLIDWORKS logo in there. How's that? Put your own company logo in there. That'll look great. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So now I have my input. We get out of our card editor, and I'm just going to add that particular card to this list, which is now going to show me my mapping for my variables. Well, on this particular one, I need some new template variables. So what I would call these, and this is just a technique that we use, but I'm going to use T underscore. This is going to be project name. Good enough. And I'm just going to call that one just to make sure I didn't use it before. Good enough. And then there's an input for the user with a little bit of typing error there too. And then we're going to do this one. Great. Project number 1 and great. Okay, so now we've got the two types of inputs that we need. And all I have to do is map one to the other. So project name, project number. Done. From there, we simply move on and we create our folder structure. Now, you can either have this happen in the folder they right-click. So now you see current folder. This will make it so that they can right-click anywhere within the vault that they want, and this new project will be placed there. Or you can simply make a new top-level folder. And we're going to call this one a top-level folder called Enterprise. I'm sorry. Let's do engineering. This will map with our existing vault. Now it puts it automatically in the root of C: Enterprise PDM, and then my engineering folder. From there, I control my subfolders. What do I want to show up under that? Well, this new projects folder doesn't exist yet, but if it doesn't exist, it'll make it. And underneath that new projects folder, maybe we want a statement of work folder. Maybe we want a, that's a subfolder. We don't want that one there. We're going to go up to this new projects and add it there. So now I'm creating my structure. Typing like it's Friday today, guys. Sorry. Whatever else. Great. Other stuff. Then, how can I have these folders not only created, but also populated with my statement of work? Well, you pick your folder and you simply add a document to it. Now, this document could be on your hard drive initially, and it will automatically copy it to a location within the vault. I have chosen just to simply put mine in a location within the vault, so there's my templates folder. And then within that, we're just actually going to go up one folder here. Yeah, I didn't put my statement of work in there. We used the account change. Oh, there's my statement of work, excuse me. I'll grab that one there. Wait 1 second while that one wakes up. So essentially, I'm just setting up my structure at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and do my right-click mouse menu stuff and then simply roll out from there. Okay, so it's got a preview of what that's actually going to look like. Let's go ahead and do this one, and that'll be our file. Great. So it's going to go ahead and map those properties if I want, and then we'll show a data card, and we'll see if there's other permissions that we can have here too. Good enough. Let's share that one. That's pretty much it. Throw an icon on it, make something that looks good. You know, we use this little EPDM logo that's there. And from that point, who can actually do this? And we'll let anybody that's in engineering and analysis and management take care of that. So kind of a long drawn-out process for this sake, but it really only took me about 7 minutes just to do that whole thing. So now what you see is a new template called EPDM Webinar. One of the other things, and we weren't going to talk about it in this, but I need to make a point right now, is that I've just edited the administrative portion of this vault. And on all of our competitors, or most of which out there, an edit like this is usually done on a night or a weekend so that the software can be redeployed to all the users. Well, in our case, we redeploy changes immediately. So when I go out into my folder structure and I right-click, go to New, what you'll now see under Consistency Templates is EPDM Webinar. So it adds these types of changes on the fly, real-time, with no disruption to your users. So with this, I'm actually going to go ahead and go up one level and right-click and do it there because we have prescribed the folder that this actually gets put in. You'll notice in engineering, I do not have a folder called New Projects currently. So we're going to right-click over here, say New, and we're going to go ahead and run the one that we just did. So there's my project name. And then the number is going to be very simply good enough. When I say OK, it's now going to run the template. Now with the template, it creates the underlying folders that need to be there. You'll see New Projects has now shown up. Underneath New Projects, I have 3 subfolders. And underneath my SOW folder, I have my account change request form already ready to go for this particular customer. Furthermore, we could have the name of this request form also mimic the name of the customer or the name of the project. So what's great about this function is that if I start another new project with another new customer, the new projects folder is already there. It's just going to add to the population. If I go ahead and change it and add maybe a customer name on top of that, every new project I start will then be thrown in that same customer names folder with the depth that we continue to do this. So it's extremely easy to do this even in a live format like we've just done here to show all of the details that we've got there. Okay, Dennis, I'm going to run a little long here, but we're going to keep going on the next one. Anything to add to that one?
Well, that's good stuff. Good stuff, especially since we have a number of people using Enterprise already. Hopefully you got some value out of that.
Okay, so now we're going to jump back to SOLIDWORKS for a moment here. Inside of Enterprise Data Management, you'll see all these little columns that we've got here, and these columns amount to properties. If we go into any file within any folder that we've got here, we'll go into and check this assembly out. What you're going to see is part numbers, states, data, part type. This type of stuff is rampant throughout the system because properties are how we search for things. Property is how we find out whether a part is purchased or built. And it's a great way to be able to segregate one from the other to get those types of lists. Well, a lot of this can start from directly within SOLIDWORKS. If I go ahead and open up just a regular old file within SOLIDWORKS, what I've got here is, I don't know why I'm getting a login for another vault, but we'll do that. This might be located in that other vault. So we're going to go ahead and just open up the properties file that was there before. Okay, so in SOLIDWORKS, if you simply go to File and down to Properties, you'll notice that I've got a few on this one. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete those because that isn't the file that I wanted. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and do that. So no properties within this particular file, as I've already tested this before. Something that people aren't using that are longtime SOLIDWORKS users was added to the software in 2010, and it's called the Property Manager. And over here on the right-hand side, there's actually a Custom Properties tab that shows specific properties that can be applied to a file. Now, this particular Custom Properties tab allows us to create a formed input that then fills up those properties that you saw under the File Properties pull-down menu, which again is currently empty. Now, the way this particular Custom Properties mechanism works is under your SOLIDWORKS installed directory. There is a feature right here under SOLIDWORKS Tools called Property Tab Builder. And when you fire that up, it actually brings up a nice form building mechanism that allows us to create what you see over there on the right-hand side. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just open the one up that I'm currently using just so you can see how this takes place. What you'll see are group boxes. You'll see a series of inputs beneath those group boxes. And then in this case, what we have is part number, description, created by. You can see those over in SOLIDWORKS. And then there's a make or buy radio button. Cool thing here is that if I click my make button, it adds a property called built. If I click buy, it adds a property called purchased. Furthermore, if I click make, it actually makes this manufacturing group pop up, this guy right here with materials and finishes. If I click buy, it actually pops up this box. So over in SOLIDWORKS, you'll see the difference is make versus buy actually changes the functionality within the system. Now, if I really wanted to, and I'm not going to show you too much on this part, but we'll go ahead and add something that's generic. I'm going to add a group box just by dragging this into place. So I've got a brand new group box. We can call it whatever, literally. And then maybe a text box that goes in that group box right there. And we'll just call this new property. Now, that new property can have any name it wants to be, or it can be just a generic property that comes with SOLIDWORKS. Could be material, could be a cost, something else that we might want to have in there. Maybe we'll just go ahead and call that one cost. That's fine. Good enough. And then a value for that if we want to prescribe an initial value. So with this particular feature now, if I save this property tool and then go over into SOLIDWORKS and actually click reset, there's my cost value. So we can call this thing whatever we want it to be. Maybe it's $5. I'm just going to put a 5 in there because I haven't really formatted that cell. But more importantly, if we go ahead and choose make or buy, we can use our material, which I have my full material editor available to me. Let's call that one copper. Part's going to change visually to copper. My finish, well, my finish is also a pull-down list that I can control. So again, consistency is everywhere. Maybe I want to go ahead and take this part and anodize it. I don't know if we're going to anodize copper, so maybe we'll just paint that, make sure it doesn't get any conductivity in those spots. Created by, again, a pull-down list. Maybe Dennis is working in SOLIDWORKS today. He's going to create this particular file. And then again, part numbers, descriptions, All of that can either be manual input if it's not important or pull down controlled if it is. So when I click apply to this, magically, now I go to my file and properties, and you'll see everything has now been added to this particular one, plus a configuration specific one that I've set up for my cost. Great. So that sets us up for success. Well, now this particular file, which if I look at my file find references is actually located on my desktop, I can now go ahead and take this file and do a save as. I could also copy and paste it, but for effect, let's go to C drive, Enterprise PDM, and let's just go and save this directly into our vault. We'll just do it right here. So my file name is there, my description that I typed in right over here is already there. And when we go ahead and click save, any of these properties that match a data card, which is the essence of property control within a data management system, is automatically populated. So at this point, my build is there, today's date happens to be there, Dennis, copper, and then all the other configuration specific things that I typed in right up here at the top. Now at this point, there might be features that I didn't think about. Maybe my vendor is going to be SMC, who knows. Project name and number, yet to be determined, because those might be where I'm actually placing the files, what determines each of those. And then this gives us the control of all of the details as this particular file is dropped into the vault. So now back over to our vault just a moment. You'll actually see my file called properties. There's test file, it's checked out by me, and then anything else that might be related to that particular file. We can quickly see that there is also a very nice preview of this file within the system. For people who do not have SOLIDWORKS on their system, they can actually click in this window and they immediately get an eDrawings preview of what this file is actually going to look like. So it's got measurements, it's got markup, it's actually an eDrawings professional license that we get as a result of this. So very cool stuff for disseminating data throughout the system. And yeah, we'd like to have you buy a license for everybody that you own of SOLIDWORKS, but frankly, this is a better way to do it for those that don't use CAD but need to be able to access these files for a lot of different reasons. And again, over here on the side, all of my project information that came in based on my properties. So now when we're looking elsewhere in the vault, this type of stuff is quite important because essentially, you're going to look at a file, you're going to see a few particular things. You might look at parts within this system, and also you're going to see a few particular sub things with those. But from within SOLIDWORKS, if we took an entire assembly and set it up this way, we can also do a very large amount of bulk applying of these properties to set these things up for success as well. So here what I actually have is an assembly. And you'll notice something very interesting about this. When I open up an assembly and I look at my custom properties, I have a different interface than you saw before. It's actually got some assembly process functions that we've added there. However, if I select a part within the window, it automatically toggles over to my part properties that you just saw me do, including the little cost value that I just added. Why this is also cool is because I can open up an assembly, and if I've neglected to put properties in over the years and we just want to get things straight now, I can actually multi-pick several of these parts. And let's just say, for instance, we grab all of these parts, which are all currently made of copper. You'll see that copper is showing because they're consistent, but these are showing with stars because they're different between each of the files. But I can switch all of those files from copper over to cast iron, and automatically on screen, I've now done a bulk property selection and application to all of these files. My graphics will update here in just a second. So that's a quick way to be able to apply them. Open up a dummy assembly, dump in all of your parts that you want to set similar, and then just window select them and apply the properties. You don't even have to save the assembly. Hitting save of the assembly will apply and save those properties in all the part files, and then you can move on. Just use that assembly to facilitate the bulk application of these properties. Great way to use this type of functionality, including make or buy. You can set it bulk make, set it bulk buy, and then go ahead and start choosing the vendors from the list that we might have here. So some fantastic ways to go ahead and do these types of things to set yourself up again for success within EPDM. Now the last topic that I want to get to with this, and we'll just roll right into this, Dennis, if that's okay for timing, is just your bill of materials templates and how we can actually use all of this data to get the right bill of materials out of the system. So looking inside of my engineering folder here, what you'll see is if I grab this assembly, you'll see a nice drive assembly that I've placed in there. The drive assembly's got its own data card full of whatever needs to be there. You'll also see the versioning that we have and how this part has evolved. We only see the one file, but at any point I can actually right-click and I can go back and get previous versions if those happen to be the more desirable ones and we just went off in the wrong direction. Just is what it is. But the most important thing about an assembly in here is the ability to find things like what it contains, or conversely, picking a part and finding a where used. You can't find a where used of a part in just basic SOLIDWORKS. It just can't happen. But in data management, we have the capability to see backwards up the tree and find out all the assemblies that are physically using these parts. So it's a nice little detail there. But the bill of materials is ultimately what we need to get out of this particular system. So right now I've got a bunch of parts in here that have properties like their part numbers. These may be different than the file names. These could be the purchase names if you so desire. And then a few descriptions, although not all of those. But what we're really focusing on this one is part type, purchased versus built. The way we get these columns to actually show up works in both the Windows lookup here on the top, the column view, as well as the bill of materials. And this is for the EPDM customers out there currently. We're back in the admin tool. If you want to show any types of additional columns, go to your Columns tab, click on Explorer, and here you can add the variables that you want to show up in any of these columns. So if I want to add a new column to my top level, maybe associate that with a property of interest, maybe cost in this case, by adding this variable and saying OK, all I have to do is go back to my enterprise data management system. You'll see it's not there yet, and that's because we need a bit of a refresh. But now when I go back down into this list, now what we actually have is our cost column in there. Fantastic stuff. That deployed in 5 seconds. The IT guys out there have to see the value in that. You just have to. But most importantly is when I'm picking on an assembly and I want to go ahead and get exactly what I want shown out of this assembly in the bill of materials. Again, in our EPDM tool, this time not in columns because that's just my Windows view, we want to go up to bill of materials. We actually want to go ahead and show the BOM view. Now you can see everything that I have shown here. I have part type, revision, description. It's exactly what you saw over in the other section. Again, if I add a new column, I associate it with an existing property. In this case, maybe I'll go ahead and just choose something different just to be different. In this case, type materials. You can set the columns to their size. Good enough. Now we've got an additional column. So when I say OK to that, deployment has just taken place. We'll go ahead and click off of that file and back on it. And now what I get as a result of that is an additional column over there with the materials for any part that's been set within SOLIDWORKS. So glad I had one there for the display of this one. Now let's get the bill of materials that we want out to the manufacturing floor or to our ERP system. From this case, what we're going to do is filter this. So I'm just going to go ahead and save off a version of this that I, as a user, can edit, which is now going to go ahead and give me something where I can use some nice criteria at the top. I can switch views. I can actually search through this bill of materials if it's lengthy for any string that I'd like. I can compare this bill of materials to previous versions, knowing what has changed, what's been added, and what's been removed by these different colored symbologies down here at the bottom. Or I can very simply filter. Now the filter on this one's going to be real easy. I'm just going to go ahead and say I want to filter everything where my part type is equal to, and we're just going to go ahead and say purchased. We'll go ahead and say OK. Let's do that one more time. I want to do that one more time because I did not enable that filter. Yikes. Great. Let's go ahead and do it that way. Now what I have is a bill of materials that has filtered out everything in the built column. Now that can be a lot of different things. You can filter 10 different things. Purchased and anything that's approved, and maybe it's got a particular part number. So you can be as absolutely detailed and granular on this if you'd like. From here, it's a very simple button. Kicks out a CSV file. The CSV file will immediately open in Microsoft Excel, and now I can do any formatting that I'd like to go to any recipient system that I'd like. So your bill of materials is what you want it to be, and that's individual to everybody that's on the call today. All right, Dennis.
Excellent stuff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we kept you a little bit late, so we appreciate everybody hanging in there. I think there's a lot of good content in here. We probably could talk for, what, maybe a couple more weeks, Aaron?
Yeah, I was talking fast, so yeah.
We're going to go slow, too, but we'll work on that. Let's wrap things up. There's a couple of questions and a couple more polls. We'll answer a question while I throw a poll out here. If those with us want to answer this real quickly. Good question came up about working with templates and moving them from one version to another, and the benefits of of doing that. So is there a benefit of starting a new template between new versions? And by versions, the attendee wanted to know, like, you have 2012 SOLIDWORKS, does it make sense to make a new template in 2013, or is it best to just move that forward? And I think it kind of speaks to the whole topic that we're talking today, maybe not just templates, but the bigger umbrella picture of best practices. What do you think, Darren?
Well, templates are an interesting thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a library full of templates. And actually, oddly enough, I don't go to the next version and then open up each of my previous templates and then save them in that version. It's actually something I've never been in the habit to do, because honestly, when you start a file from a template, you're going to make something and then you're going to save it as a part. That will be the new version. So there may be a performance thing. I don't see a whole lot of that, so I don't bother with it. But templates don't give you a version issue. Now, they will give you a future version issue if you do save it in 2013 and then somebody tries to start a new file with that 2013 saved template. So again, least common denominator here, my older templates will open up in every version that I do. So I've almost made it a habit to not update those, just to keep them usable, because in our world here we might be using multiple versions of SOLIDWORKS depending on the support situation. So when you save it as a part file, though, it is the current version no matter what you do, part, assembly, or drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, versioning of those, people who have permissions within the vault could open up that template. They could change the title block, add a revision block, do whatever needs to happen as an edit to those files, and then save it and check it in. And what would basically happen is that would be the version available to any user starting brand new files. So essentially the latest version of that file would be the one available to them when they say File New and they click Part or Drawing. It would be transparent to them, but essentially they would be using the latest and greatest version there.
And I always kind of think of templates as an evolutionary process. You're always going to want to take advantage of the new features that are in the latest version of any program, but you don't want to necessarily throw away everything that you've done up to that point in time. You want to have an opportunity or a mechanism to move that forward, whether that's a manual process through Windows or something more automated as we've been showing in Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
I got the last poll question up here, and we appreciate, again, everybody participating and answering these. I'll shut that down in just a second here, and then we'll ask you just to kind of pay attention for our next topic as we come up with the YPDM series, and we try and also wrap into the areas that you deal with and work with today, such as Windows and SOLIDWORKS, and how you can leverage and set the systems up that you're using today to move into a PDM system as your company grows or that becomes an issue for you. Anything else on your part, Darren, that you wanted to bring out?
No, I think I'm all set on this side.
Okay, let me close this poll and I'll share that one real quickly. This really speaks to one of the benefits of having templates and best practices. Something that a lot of employers are looking at now, especially finally turning the corner here in Michigan. A lot of companies are hiring. How long does it take to get people on board in your company? And engineers are probably one of the harder staff people to bring up to speed on your practices. So any tools and processes that you can set in place to make that easier is going to help get people more productive, and also following the processes that you define for your company that much quicker. So I think the goal is always, for everything that we do, try and do things quicker, but also more accurately and in a better process. If there's any other questions that come up as you get back to work, feel free to shoot either Darren or I a question, and we're happy to be following up with you after this as well. So I want to thank everybody for attending and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.